It began like any ordinary morning in the Irish countryside. Birds chirping over green pastures, sheep grazing in the mist, and Michael Gaine, a 56-year-old cattle and sheep farmer, quietly going about his daily routine in Carrick East near Kenmare, County Kerry. But within hours, that calm would fracture. On March 20th, 2025, Michael walked into White's Centra in Kenmare to top up his phone. He was caught on CCTV alone buying credit. That would be the last confirmed sighting of him ever. He never picked up calls again, never answered texts, never came home. And for a man known as quiet, kind, dependable, the type to check on neighbors and never miss farm chores, his sudden silence was chilling. His wife Janice tried calling. No answer. His sister Noreen began to worry. When local guard checked his farm, they found his car in the yard, his phone inside the house. Even his wallet was there. But Michael vanished. There was no note, no sign of forced entry, no disturbance, just a farm frozen in routine, as if he had simply stepped out and never came back. But what no one knew was that Michael's farm would soon become the center of Ireland's most disturbing crime scene in decades. At first, Gardaí treated it like a missing persons case. Michael Gaine wasn't the type to just walk away. No signs of depression, no financial trouble, no known enemies. And yet, there were zero leads. His car hadn't moved. His bank accounts remained untouched. There were no calls placed, no pings on his phone, and no witnesses claiming to have seen him after that quick stop at White's Centra. Search parties combed the surrounding fields. Drones scanned the hills. Divers even checked nearby waterways. Family, neighbors, strangers all joined the search. And the farm? Still and silent. Sheep in their pens. Tools left in place. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary until you noticed what was missing. Michael's work boots. They weren't in the house. They weren't on the porch. It was as if he had put them on, stepped out the back door, and evaporated. For weeks, the trail stayed cold. No ransom notes, no confessions, not even rumors. The official stance from Gardaí, still under investigation. But behind closed doors, something didn't sit right. How could a full-grown man vanish from his own land in daylight without leaving a single clue? And then, just when the town began to lose hope, the farm spoke. On the morning of May 16th, 2025, nearly 2 months after Michael Gaine vanished, a farm worker was spreading slurry on one of Michael's fields. That's when the machine jammed. At first, it seemed like a mechanical issue, maybe a rock, maybe debris. But when the worker opened the tank to check, what he found wasn't dirt. It was human flesh. Slurry tanks are grim, dangerous machines. They churn waste, animal byproducts, and farm runoff into fertilizer. But this tank held something no one was prepared for. Body parts. Shocked, the worker called Gardaí immediately. By that afternoon, Michael Gaine's farm, once a quiet stretch of green hills, was a crime scene surrounded by forensic tents, floodlights, and detectives in white suits. The body wasn't intact. It had been cut apart, piece by piece, and thrown into the slurry tank, presumably to dissolve and disappear. But it didn't. And now that tank meant to nourish crops had revealed Ireland's most gruesome clue in a generation. And that wasn't the only place they found him. Once the remains were confirmed as human, Gardaí locked down the entire farm. They didn't just search the slurry tank, they brought in cadaver dogs, drones, and the Defense Forces Engineers Specialist Search Team. The farm was now ground zero for a full-scale forensic operation, and it didn't stop with the tank. Additional remains, including tissue and partial bones, were discovered in the fields where slurry had already been spread. Soil samples were taken from multiple paddocks. They even began sifting through the waste line by line, searching for any trace of Michael Gaine. It became clear this wasn't just a killing, it was a calculated dismemberment designed to erase him. What kind of person does that? Investigators found signs that some body parts were processed through the machinery, possibly while still soft tissue was intact. That meant the disposal happened not long after death, and someone familiar with the farm likely did it. The house was scoured, the sheds examined, but the most damning evidence was buried in the dirt. Michael Gaine, the man, had been turned into fertilizer on his own land. And then they found something in the yard that changed everything again. As forensic teams combed through Michael Gaine's property, one item stood out: a chainsaw left in plain view near the edge of a farm shed. It wasn't just dirty, it was stained. Gardai immediately seized it and sent it for forensic analysis. The suspicion? That this very tool was used to dismember Michael's body before being dumped in the slurry tank. It wasn't just blood they were looking for. They were checking for tissue fragments, DNA, and tool marks that could match cuts found on recovered bones. If proven, it would confirm not just intent to kill, but deliberate mutilation and effort to destroy identity, cause of death, and evidence all at once. But that wasn't all. Near the same area, they found a coil of rope frayed, stained, and half buried in hay. They also recovered heavy gloves and what appeared to be industrial cleaning solution stored nearby. Investigators believe the chainsaw wasn't just used in a moment of panic. It was part of a methodical process likely carried out on site, possibly within hours of Michael's disappearance. And that's when the theory shifted. This wasn't just a killing. This was planned disposal, likely by someone who knew the land, the man, and the machines. The evidence was piling up, and soon the Gardai made an arrest. With body parts recovered, a chainsaw sent to forensics, and a crime scene that spanned fields, tanks, and sheds, pressure was building on Gardai to act. And then they made a move. On May 17th, just one day after the remains were discovered, Gardai arrested a man in his 50s. He was well known to Michael Gaine, not just an acquaintance, but someone who reportedly had regular access to the farm. The arrest sent shockwaves through the community. This wasn't a stranger, it was someone familiar, possibly even trusted. He was taken in for questioning on suspicion of murder, but then, just as quickly, he was released without charge. No name, no mugshot, no explanation. Authorities cited insufficient evidence. They couldn't hold him, not yet. Not without DNA confirmation, not without a timeline, not without tying him directly to the dismemberment. But that didn't mean he was off the radar. Gardai confirmed that he remains a person of interest. They're digging into his background, examining past disputes, financial records, even phone data around the time of Michael's disappearance. Locals whispered about old feuds, business deals gone sour, quiet warnings Michael might have ignored. The silence around the arrest speaks volumes. And for Michael's family, it's unbearable. But if one man was involved, what else could be hidden on that land? Michael Gaine's farm wasn't just a crime scene. It was a puzzle one the Gardai were determined to solve piece by gruesome piece. Once human remains were discovered, authorities called in Ireland's Defence Forces Engineers Specialist Search Team. These aren't typical search and rescue personnel. They're trained for the kind of forensic fieldwork used in war zones and mass graves. They used drones to map the fields, ground-penetrating radar to scan beneath the soil, and cadaver dogs trained to detect decomposition in waterlogged or contaminated areas like a slurry tank. The search zone expanded beyond the tank and into the pasture lands, hay barns, and old storage sheds. Investigators methodically bagged anything out of place: torn fabric, suspicious tools, soil samples with traces of organic material. And more remains were found in the fields, in the sprayed slurry, and possibly even in the machinery itself. Michael's body, it turns out, hadn't just been dumped, it had been distributed, deliberately, mechanically, like someone knew exactly what would happen when a body went through a slurry system. But the deeper they dug, the more one thing became clear. This wasn't random, it was knowledge based. Someone who knew farming, someone who understood how to use the land to hide a body. And while the evidence grew, the emotional toll exploded. For Michael's family, the nightmare was only beginning. Kenmare is a quiet town. People know each other's names. Doors aren't always locked. And when someone's in trouble, the whole town shows up. So when Michael Gaine vanished, and later when his dismembered remains were found scattered across his own land, it hit everyone like a punch to the chest. His wife Janice, who had spent weeks clinging to hope, now faced the unthinkable. Her husband had not just died, he had been butchered. She released a short, trembling statement to the press, thanking the community and pleading with anyone who knows anything to come forward. Her grief was clear, but so was her exhaustion. Michael's sister Noreen also stepped in, demanding answers, demanding justice, and begging Gardaí not to let the case fall into silence. Locals gathered near the entrance to the farm, leaving flowers, candles, and handwritten notes. A simple wooden cross was erected along the dirt road leading to the fields where he worked his whole life. People weren't just mourning Michael. They were mourning the loss of safety, of trust, of something sacred, the belief that rural land and those who work it are untouched by horror. Because Michael Gaine wasn't a criminal. He wasn't mixed up in anything. He was just a farmer. And now he's a name etched into Ireland's darkest headlines. And as grief turned to anger, one question took over the town. Why? By now, one thing was clear. Michael Gaine didn't just die. He was eliminated in a way that suggests rage, planning, or both. But why? Gardaí have yet to name a suspect publicly. No motive has been officially confirmed. Still, whispers have begun to circulate in pubs, on forums, even in neighboring counties. Theory 1: a land dispute. Michael owned valuable farmland. Some reports suggest a recent boundary disagreement with another landowner, possibly the same man who was arrested and released. Was this about property, territory, pride? Theory 2: a personal vendetta. Locals mention that Michael was strict about farm rules, not easy to cross. Did someone feel humiliated, challenged? Did a long-standing grudge finally boil over? Theory 3: something deeper and darker. Could Michael have discovered something he wasn't supposed to? A secret on his land? A betrayal by someone close? The use of a chainsaw, the calculated disposal, it hints at a killer who was comfortable with violence, not acting in panic. And yet, Michael had no criminal record, no known enemies. He didn't drink, didn't gamble, didn't go to war with neighbors. The profile didn't fit the victim of a revenge killing, which leaves the most chilling possibility. Was this about power? Was it someone who wanted control over land, over silence, over what stories get buried and forgotten? Because for now, despite the body being found, the truth still isn't. But justice doesn't wait forever. And this case, this horror is far from over. Michael Gaine spent his life tending land, not making enemies. He raised animals, not suspicions. And yet, someone decided to end that life violently, methodically, and without remorse. But despite the discovery of his remains, despite the chainsaw, the slurry tank, the man briefly arrested, this case is still open. DNA testing is ongoing. Forensic reports are not yet finalized. No one has been charged. And every day that passes without justice is another day his wife, his sister, his town live in fear not just of who did it, but of the possibility that they're still walking free, maybe even close by. Gardai say the investigation is active and progressing. But many are asking, is that enough? Because this wasn't just a murder. This was a message, a demonstration that in even the most peaceful places, darkness can thrive if no one stops it. So if you know something, anything, speak. If you think this story deserves more attention, share it. And if you believe Michael Gaine deserves justice, don't let this case fade. Because Ireland remembers. And justice, no matter how long it takes, starts with not forgetting. If you found this video important, subscribe. We cover the stories the headlines drop too quickly, the cases that still matter, and the victims who still need voices.